Welcome to ChannelX TV, sponsored by Volo. Delighted to be joined by Tony from Fruugo today to discuss Clause 6.5 of the EU Digital Markets Act. So first of all, welcome, Tony. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Chris, and thank you for having me on the show.
So first of all, Clause 6.5 of the EU Digital Markets Act, no one really knows what it means, but there's one particular part of it which is troubling me, and that is the comparison shopping services who are lobbying the EU to make this act apply to them in search engine results. And this will apply to multiple search engines, but for the UK, we know Google is 90% of the UK traffic. So, Tony, what are the CSSs after? What are they trying to do?
Well, they're arguing that Google is treating them unfairly, and the Digital Markets Act requires Google as a gatekeeper to provide unbiased access to its services and not to promote its own services more preferentially than that of others. And what the CSSs are arguing is that product listing ads that we as advertisers have known and loved for a long time are in fact a form of comparison shopping service, and consequently by placing it at the top of the search engine results page, or SERPs for the purpose of the rest of this conversation, that Google is placing greater prominence on its ad unit than on any other ad unit that appears, and consequently CSSs are being disadvantaged. Now, they've got the argument appears to be swinging between the CSSs who argue that product listing ads should simply be got away with, just get rid of them altogether and just show organic results.
And that would be devastating for Google, let alone the retailers that rely on them, because it's most of Google's income.
It would be an earthquake. I mean, I think we all recognize that to some extent our use of Google services is subsidized by the advertising that we consume as users, and product listing ads are by far and away the most significant source of income to Google, and consequently it would completely upend the entire search engine landscape because it would render all sorts of things unviable.
So let's just go back 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. I remember a time when you searched for something on Google and every result in the organic results, because this was before product listing ads, was for the likes of Kelku and Nextag and Shopzilla and Shopping.com. And it was all comparison shopping engines. And it was almost impossible if you were searching for a product to actually sometimes to even find the manufacturer's site to research a product, let alone find a retailer that you could buy it from. And thankfully back then, Google kind of lowered their prominence in organic search results, because it was literally, if you remember, it was all of the first page and most of the second page was just comparison shopping engines.
Well, there was a brief period where these companies had worked out a way to effectively spam the Google index. And to be fair to Google, I don't think what they've done over time is designed to prefer or bias against any particular other firm. It's simply they're trying to provide results to consumers that are useful, and they try to detect usefulness by what happens when a click occurs and how likely a customer is to go on and purchase.
And frankly, the bounce rate when you hit a site and immediately go back to search and try and find a better result.
Well, that takes us right back to where we are today, which is that what Google is doing in order to comply with the Digital Markets Act is to provide CSSs with access to the product listing ads. And that's not been possible until this point. So I think that's only rolling out in the last week or so. Because until this point, the only people allowed in product listing ads were sites where the product was purchasable, e-commerce sites. And what Google's now done is to allow CSSs to appear in those product listing ads, which means that for the first time, non-transactional websites are going to be promoted through product listing ads. And as I guess I know Chris, and many of the people watching will know, the market for CSS services was deregulated in 2018, which means that a lot of retailers are using CSSs primarily as a way of getting their products into Google Merchant Centers, and they can bid more efficiently if they do that. But now, as a result of these changes, they're going to find that the CSS companies that they've been partnering with are now going to be their competitors, and they're going to be trying to steal traffic off them.
Yeah, you pay to have your product on Google, and you expect it to show up on Google. You may use a CSS as a vehicle for doing that, but the last thing you want is for your product to show up, land on a CSS, and find that they're now selling the product for a similar product from different retailers. You want them to actually want some way of getting them to actually land on your product page and potentially purchase.
Well, there's two things I'm worried about. One is that consumers aren't going to like it and they'll get confused, and that will reduce the popularity of the product listing ad format because people will just dislike it because it becomes unpredictable whether a click results in a visit to a place where you can buy the product or a comparison shopping site. And I rather suspect that what's going to happen is that these CSSs are going to see a lot of bounce rate because people are going to land on their sites and go, well, that's not what I wanted, and they're going to disappear again. And that in turn will mean the CSSs will claim that this market remedy that Google's introduced isn't working for them. Well, I think what they'll be demonstrating is that consumers are trying to buy the products and not sort of research it in the way they argue that they are supposed to be doing or should be doing. The second thing that worries me is about attribution, because the market today means that I can load my products to Google and know that all of my products are going to get seen or are available to be seen through those product listing ads, and we can drive our attribution logic to manage our return on advertising spend very precisely. In a world where either the PLAs don't exist or a proportion of that traffic doesn't go direct to the advertiser, to me as the e-commerce side, but instead goes to a CSS, it's going to become much more tricky to figure out whether that spend optimization is working or not, because as you just said, the CSSs are going to gather this traffic and then they're going to determine through some fairly murky arrangements with advertisers which party receives the ad, receives the customer. So
I've got to say, I like Google product listing ads because I can actually see where I'm going to be buying from before I even click. So let's say I'm looking for a Dyson. I might see a Dyson link to the Dyson site. I might see one to Currys, one to Amazon, one to eBay, all for the same model, perhaps all very much the same price because there's not that much movement on price on Dysons. But I can choose, do I want to buy it from Dyson because it's direct from the manufacturer? Do I want to buy it from Amazon because it's one click? Do I prefer to buy it on eBay because I like eBay? Do I want to buy it from Currys and potentially I'll look at it from Currys, but I might want to go into store and pick it up today and I just want to find out the price and spec and availability from Currys, and maybe even reserve on the Currys website to pick up in store, or maybe Currys haven't got it in stock, so I go to Argos to pick up in store today. But I can actually see in the Google product listing ad who I'm going to be buying from if I click that ad. And that to me is much more valuable than a random click to a site, which, let's face it, when you land on a CSS, all they're going to do is show me multiple places that I might want to buy it from.
And probably less personalized than Google can, because the results that you're seeing on that search engine results page from Google is going to be sensitive to your location, your previous search history, your previous purchasing, all of which is tied to your Google identity, or at least your device. And so I also think that if product listing ads were to be removed, that advertising would get less effective because it would be less personalized, and personalization is part of what's driving efficiency and performance for advertisers.
And I've got to ask, if it becomes a mishmash of comparison shopping sites, I mean, I never used to use Google for shopping back in the day. I'd go straight to eBay, or maybe I'll go straight to Amazon. And I think lots of shoppers could take the same attitude as me. If Google can't serve me the results I want to see, I'll go somewhere where they can.
Well, I think that's probably what's going to happen. I think the stats vary by category, obviously, but in many categories, roughly 50% of product searches begin on Amazon in the UK, and roughly 50% start on Google. I mean, there obviously other search engines and other marketplaces are available, but those two are the primary gateways into product discovery for most users. And I think if Google's results simply get worse, then the inevitability is that people will gravitate more towards the search engine that they've also know and trust, which is Amazon.
So I want to be fair to the comparison shopping sites. What are the actual benefits for a consumer from them? Why would I want to go to one?
Well, I think for branded products, particularly branded electricals, they do a really good job of helping you compare specifications, understand attributes of the product, and to potentially compare both sellers of that product and their availability and price, but also to be able to look across other manufacturers who have similar specifications for that product. So, look, I'm not disputing that CSSs have a role to play. I think they have a useful purpose in the market, and many consumers will want to use their services. What I am objecting to is that their use should be effectively mandated by legislators in Europe or indeed in Britain. So, and that they should be expecting to receive, if you will, a free lunch. You know, if they want to build a brand and drive traffic to their businesses, then great, yes, they should, and for many categories, they will have an audience. But I also would point out that for many other product categories, like for example apparel, CSSs are a terrible choice. You know, if I want to buy a pair of jeans, I'm unlikely to go on Kelku. Whereas product listing ads are a really great way to discover all sorts of things. You know, lipstick, car parts. I need a spare widget for my washing machine. You know, these are the sorts of things you go on Google for, and these are the sorts of things that product listing ads are brilliant at surfacing. And I think that whereas we often talk about branded electricals as the use case for which CSSs are brilliant, and they are, but there are just so many other reasons why product listing ads need to continue to exist in their current form.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking for a birthday card or a wedding gift or anything personalized, it's highly unlikely that comparison shopping engine is going to be much use to me. Whereas Google product listing ads, if you promote your handmade wooden signs or whatever it happens to be, much more likely to be able to successfully find it through a product listing ad than I ever will by looking on a CSS.
And I think what this boils down to is the merit or otherwise of this gatekeeper idea. Because today, if I'm a small business and I want to get my products onto the e-commerce market, I just go to Google and straight away I've got access to, as you said, 90% of shoppers in the UK who are using the internet. Whereas if Google effectively ceases to become that one-stop shop for distributing my digital products, and I have to instead go to an array of CSSs because I don't know which one of them is going to have my customer looking at the products, my life is going to get an awful lot more complicated. And by complicated, I probably also mean expensive and confusing. And I just don't think at this moment, retailers really want to have their life made more expensive and more confusing.
No, I think I would agree with you there. So I think this is going to be a really interesting one to watch, and let's see what happens. I doubt there's very much I could do personally to influence this, but hopefully Google are shouting very, very, very loudly, and hopefully some people within the EU will be listening.
Well, I think it's the retailers who need to make their views known through your feedback on this site and other response media to let government know whether or not they think they would like to see these proposals from the CSS companies advance or not.
Yeah, so if you're a retailer or a brand, we look forward to hearing your comments, and feel free to email me directly, chris@channelx.world. Tony, I want to thank you so much for your time. Fascinating subject, and we'll see how this one plays out over the next months and years.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.